Welcome to the channel of Vedant classes. Today we will see the chapter 8, how organisms reproduce. Reproduction. Reproduction is the process by which living organisms produce new individuals of the same species. Reproduction is necessary for the survival and increase in population of a species. If organisms do not reproduce, their population decreases and species will become extinct. Do organisms create carbon copies of themselves? The DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid molecules in the chromosomes in the nucleus, is responsible for the transfer of characters from parents to the offsprings. During reproduction, the reproductive cells produce two copies of the DNA, which separate into two cells. The DNA copies will be similar but not identical to each other. So, new individuals have slight variation from their parents. This is the basis for variations and evolutions of new species. The importance of variation. DNA copying during reproduction is important for maintaining the body designs of different organisms to survive in the existing environment. But the environment is constantly changing due to changes in temperature, climate, water levels, etc. If organisms cannot adjust themselves to the changes in the environment, then their species will become extinct. If there are variation in some individual of a species, they may be able to survive the changes in the environment. So, variations in species is necessary for survival of different species and for the evolution of new species. Types of reproduction. There are two main types of reproduction in living organisms. They are asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction is reproduction in which new individuals are produced from a single parent. Sexual reproduction is reproduction in which two individuals are involved to produce a new individual. Asexual reproduction is of different types. They are fission, budding, regeneration, fragmentation, spore formation, vegetative propagation, etc. Difference between asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. First, it involves a single organism, and sexual reproduction involves two organisms. In asexual reproduction, there is no fusion of gamete. In sexual reproduction, male and female gamete fuses, and this process is known as fertilization. Asexual reproduction, offsprings are genetically similar to parents. In sexual reproduction, offsprings are genetically dissimilar to parents. The rate of reproduction is faster in asexual reproduction, and the rate of reproduction is slower in sexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction requires only mitotic division. Sexual reproduction requires meiotic division followed by mitotic division. In asexual reproduction, there is no production of gametes. Male and female gametes are produced in sexual reproduction. In asexual reproduction, chances of variation is only through random mutation. In sexual reproduction, there is a chance of genetic variation. Asexual reproduction occurs by budding, fragmentation, sporulation. Sexual reproduction occurs due to pollination and fertilization. Fission. Fission is an asexual reproduction by which a unicellular organism divides and forms two or more new individuals. Fission is of two types. They are binary fission and a multiple fission. Binary fission, in this method, an organism divides and forms two individuals. First, the nucleus divides and forms two nuclei. Then the cytoplasm divides and forms two daughter cells. Example, Amoeba, Paramaecium, etc. Multiple fission. In this method, one organism divides into many daughter cells. Example, Plasmodium, Malarial, parasite. Budding. In this method, a bud-like projection is formed on body of the organism. The bud then develops into new individual. It then separates from the parent and forms an independent individual. Example, Hydra, yeast. regeneration. In this method, a part of body, if the organism is cut or broken, can develop into new individual. Example, hydra, planaria, starfish, etc. Fragmentation. In this method, the body of a simple multicellular organisms break up into smaller pieces on maturation, and each fragment develops into a new individual. Example, Spirogyra. Spore formation. In this method, structures called sporangia produce tiny cells called spores. When spores come in contact with moist surface, it develops into new individuals. Example, Rhizophus, Mucor, Penicillium, etc. Vegetative propagation. In this method, new plants are produced from vegetative parts of the plant like root, stem or leaf. Example from roots, Dahlia, sweet potato. From stem, potato, ginger. From leaf, Bryophyllum, begonia. Plants produced by vegetative propagation produce flowers and fruits earlier than those produced from seeds. It also helps in propagation of plants which do not produce seeds like rose, jasmine, banana, etc. Vegetative propagation can also be done artificially by cutting, layering, grafting, etc. Sexual reproduction in flowering plants. The stamen and pistil are reproductive parts of the flower. Stamen is the male reproductive part. It produces pollen grains in the anther, which contains the male germ cell, male gamete. Pistil is a female reproductive part. It produces ovules in the ovary, which contains the female germ cell, female gamete. Pollination. The transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of a flower is called pollination. It takes place by wind, water or insects. If pollen grains are transferred from anther to the stigma of same flower, it is self-pollination. And if it is transferred from anther of one flower to stigma of another flower, it is cross-pollination. Pollination takes place by insects, wind, water, etc. Fertilization. After the pollen grain is transferred to the stigma, it produces a pollen tube which passes through style and enters the ovary and ovule. In ovule, the main germ cell fuses with female germ cell to form a zygote. This process is called fertilization. After fertilization, the zygote divides several times and forms the embryo, which then develops into seed, and the ovary develops into the fruit.